The Grand Canyon has been a place that has awed and mystified humans ever since its discovery. Through decades of professional study, there's much we have learned about the canyon. And yet, perhaps just as much still remains shrouded in mystery. The archaeological record shows evidence of a civilization thriving in the canyon about 1,000 years ago. As quickly as they arose, they seemed to disappear. What happened? Who were they, and where did they go? For the next 4 days, I'll be backpacking deep into this natural wonder to explore this story and some of the mysteries still surrounding it. Hey everybody, it's Andrew from Desert Drifter. Thanks for tuning in. So my friend Josh is joining me on this trip. There he is.
Howdy.
So we started a little over an hour ago, way back down there. We've already climbed up about 3 miles, maybe 1,500 feet of vert. So let me show you guys where we're at right now, up on the rim. So eventually today, we're gonna end up somewhere way down here. You can just make out the tops of some green cottonwood trees down there. So we've got our work cut out for us. We're going about 10 miles today. 10 miles in of itself isn't anything crazy, but a Grand Canyon mile is not the same as a mile someplace else. I don't mean that literally. It's not like there's a different type of measurement, but it's just the level of difficulty of terrain and elevation change in a mile in the Grand Canyon is really unlike most other places in the country and probably the world too. The Grand Canyon is enormous. It's impossible to comprehend unless you've seen it in person and traveled its depths. It's larger than 2 US states and numerous foreign countries. The Colorado River flows throughout the entire canyon. So when we measure the length of Grand Canyon, we do so in terms of river miles. It's 277 miles long from beginning to end. The importance of this river to the western United States can't be overstated. It is the lifeblood to millions of people out here. So where we're at right now on the northeast side of the Grand Canyon, we're about 7,500 feet above sea level. So what that means is, it's probably, low 60s right now. We're in a pinyon pine and ponderosa pine forest. I'll show you in a second, there's actually snow in places up here. We're gonna climb all the way down, right, from here, about 6,000 feet down, and we're gonna get temperatures in the low 90s today. And so those massive temperature swings, if you don't understand that and you don't come prepared for that, that's one of the big killers out here. The massive differences in the temperatures on the rim versus the bottom of the canyon can be attributed to 2 things. The first is just the way our atmosphere works. The further above sea level you are, the cooler the air is. So with the bottom of the canyon 5,000 feet lower than the top, it's going to be significantly hotter. The other reason, particularly in the summer, is what I call the oven effect. All that rock down in the canyon absorbs heat from direct sunlight. It then radiates that heat back into the air. So you get a 2-for-1 heating system down there. These temperature swings aren't just a killer, they also create an enormous diversity of plant and animal life in the canyon. As we hike down, pay attention to how the environment changes. Okay, we're back on the trail. Took just a short break up top there. Get a little intro, get you guys oriented. Got a lot of miles today, so we gotta keep pushing. I caution you, do not attempt what you're about to see unless you have significant backpacking experience in the desert. Every year, the National Park Service has to help hundreds of hikers and backpackers who overestimate their abilities and underestimate the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon will absolutely astound you, but it can kill you just as quickly. So just to try to put it in perspective a little bit, you know, we're traversing along this big sandstone cliff. This is in the Supai rock layer here. So we've got kind of the Nankoweap drainage and valley way down there. Up here, we're looking at the North Rim. This point right there in the center is called Mount Hayden. And then actually the highest point in all of Grand Canyon National Park is where the snow-covered ridgeline you see is. It's called Point Imperial. Just a mere 600-700 feet down. Like nearly all trails in the Grand Canyon, the one we're hiking is an old Native American route. How long have people lived in or used the Grand Canyon? We don't know for sure, but the best guess is somewhere between 10 to 12,000 years. This estimate is a result of a projectile point found in the canyon. This style of point has been linked to the Paleo-Indian hunter-gatherers who once roamed this landscape. The people watching who know something of the geography of this area, there's the San Francisco Peaks, which Flagstaff sits at the base of, just poking through that saddle. To put it into context, the mountains that we're seeing are nearly 70 miles distant. That's how clear the air can be out here. Well, we paused to take a little lunch break. Josh's phone said his watch said we're about 5 miles in, so from a mileage perspective, about halfway. We still got the vast majority of our elevation drop to do. But yeah, just kind of sitting here, taking it in, eating some wraps. So there's where we ate lunch. Just kind of wanted to try to put in perspective what we're seeing, because I mean, it's just, I mean, we jokingly call it the Big Ditch, but I mean, it's just a huge area that's really hard to fathom and wrap your mind around. Over here, right, we're looking at kind of a section of what would be considered the North Rim. So the North Rim generally sits in higher elevation than the South Rim. When people come and visit, you know, Grand Canyon National Park, generally most of them go to the South Rim. If we had X-ray vision and we could just look through, you know, this whole section of canyon and X-ray vision about 25 miles away from here. The South Rim infrastructure is all kind of like over here. Okay, back on trail again. So post-lunch, our next big section of trail is we sort of traverse all the way down, 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 and really out of sight, but eventually come to kind of that saddle there. And we start dropping after that, big time dropping. So many different layers of rock in the Grand Canyon, and geologically speaking, each one tells a different story. So here we have a big agave plant. Here's what they look like when they're alive. And they'll grow like that for maybe, you know, 20, 25, 30 years. And then one spring, they will decide to shoot up this stalk. Now this one's all dead, of course. But they'll shoot the stalk up. I mean, some of them, that's probably 15 feet tall. Then the stalk will bloom. These are all the dead blooms. And inside, eventually it'll go to seed. And that's how it propagates. but almost similar to the salmon, you know, who goes upstream, spawns, and then dies. This thing, when it shoots the stock up, dies as well. All right, we are on kind of a saddle, taking a little break in the shade. We've come down all this. We dropped in somewhere around the corner, like way up there. The shadows are definitely growing longer down there. The trail drops down. There's a little cairn there. Drops down and it gets real steep real quick. And we're gonna drop a lot of elevation. Eventually wind up somewhere down there. Look at this helicopter flying overhead. It's one of the scenic tours. This is, can we see anybody up there? Just to put in perspective how small that thing is out here. Look at that. Teeny tiny helicopter. Puts in perspective how big this place is. And right on the other side, got our first glimpse of the Colorado River. See it way down there? It's where we're gonna be, not that exact spot, but that vicinity tomorrow. So what we're looking at over there is not only the other side of the canyon, that's actually a part of the Navajo Indian Reservation. So I'd mentioned the Navajo Indian Reservation just a second ago. You know, one of the things that makes the Grand Canyon, particularly Grand Canyon National Park, quite unique is there are actually 3 Indian reservations that border parts of the national park and actually contain parts of the Grand Canyon in the reservation. And so those 3 reservations are the Navajo, the Havasupai, and the Wallapai. Here's Josh up here, looking all hiker aesthetic. What do you think of this trip, Josh?
Easy so far.
I laughed because we had been taking our sweet time, just enjoying being in a beautiful place. But the shadows brought a new sense of urgency, so we doubled down to get to the creek before dark. Descending the steepest and loosest section of trail, we pushed on until we found a good camp spot. Just a jumble of rock layers. Take a look at that. That's all twisted up. Geologists would have some explanation for that. The basin we're descending into is called Nankoweap. It comes from the Paiute language. Its etymology is intriguing. The name was first recorded by John Wesley Powell, the first white man to lead an official expedition into this region in the 1880s. He asked the Paiutes what the name meant. The translation he recorded in his journal was, "Where the Indians had a fight." Was this a name that was honoring something in the Paiutes' more recent history? Or was its origin in some legend passed down from long ago? From a time before the Paiutes had migrated into this area. The creek bottom at long last. I don't know if the audio is picking it up, but there are a ton of frogs down there. Well, we're cooking up a little mac and cheese tonight. You want to pass me that onion? We got a little toad running through our camp here. Okay, tonight sauteed up some veggies and some already cooked like pre-cooked bacon stuff from the store, and some mac and cheese. Gonna combine that. Oh, bro! I'm considering making a backcountry recipe cookbook. If that's something you'd be interested in, drop a comment, let me know. Well, good morning. We're on the move again. We had a pretty slow morning around camp, just enjoying the cottonwoods and the creek. But now we're headed down to the river, which is about 3 miles away and is the ultimate destination. So I'm excited. All right, we're moving down the creek, and look what is moving out this morning. It's a mule deer, a doe, browsing on some of that probably fresh spring greenery. Pretty cool stuff. That's where we're headed. We're headed down this canyon. Now alongside the creek, life seemed to be teeming all around us. Everything was out this morning, welcoming us to this desert oasis. It would be easy in a place like this to be so engrossed by the beauty that you'd miss the human story hidden between these walls. The closer we got to the river, the closer we got to the heart of a prehistoric civilization. The Grand Canyon and the Colorado River. Man, they never cease to amaze. So this is the big drainage we came down. The confluence is kind of right down in that area. There's the Colorado River. So I'm up above the creek and the river, kind of on this spit of land that like juts out from the main cliff bands behind me. So this is the view to one side. I mean, talk about epic. And here's the other direction. And so again, just to give you kind of orientation, came down, dropped packs right up there. Now undoubtedly the most dramatic of it all, check these out. 1,000-year-old granaries perched up on this big band of limestone. So we're gonna get to that in a second. But first I wanna show you guys what's down here and talk about some of the archaeological excavations that they did here in the 1960s. Because without really realizing it, we've just walked into basically the heart of a thriving little civilization. Let me jump in here and zoom out to try and give you a bigger picture of what we're about to explore. We've already established the Grand Canyon has seen human habitation for thousands of years. Truthfully, we know relatively little about the ancient peoples here. The best estimate I could find was that only 5% of archaeological sites in the canyon have been professionally surveyed. The amount that have been excavated would be even less. That statistic alone shows how much more we may discover in the coming years. Although there's a lot to learn, we're not completely clueless either. It appears most of the early people lived a nomadic lifestyle, leaving little trace of their passing in the Grand Canyon. One interesting exception to this are the hundreds of split twig figurines that have been found in Grand Canyon caves. That's right, wooden figures, not Egyptian mummies and lost cities. As the name implies, these figures are made of branches, often willow, that have been split and twisted into shapes representing deer or bighorn sheep. Professional dating of these have given dates ranging from 4,400 to 3,100 years ago, or roughly 2000 BC. Meaning, for 1,300 years, people were placing these in caves throughout the Grand Canyon. That's a long time. So who and why? Well, they're attributed to the people that have been called the Desert Archaic. They were hunter-gatherers. Once again, we know very little about these people. So why caves, and why these figures? Caves could possibly represent some spiritual belief in an underworld, much like some modern-day southwestern tribes. Some of the figurines have been found with miniature spears piercing their sides, or with animal dung interwoven into them. This has led to the theory that they were some kind of hunting charm or offering. We'll probably never know for sure, but they're fascinating to consider. Let's bring it back to the site we're visiting now. With the introduction of agriculture into the Southwest, more permanent communities arose. Here, where the creek and river join, we have come to the remnants of one of those. So you can see better from this angle. You've got a wall that would have run over there, connecting here, and coming along back to where I'm standing. And it seems like also coming off, there's a separate wall. In terms of size, I'd probably estimate it about 30 feet by 15 feet. And it seems like it was also probably divided in half there. Undoubtedly, these are manos, which are basically, grinding stones. Mano comes from Spanish word for hand, because you would take these and you would grind, corn and grains and things using your hand, and then you would have had what's also called a metate. Oh, speaking of which, I actually didn't realize this is clearly one of those. So you can see how this has been, smoothed out. This is definitely not naturally that smooth. But these would have been used on a platform like this to grind corn, other seeds, things like that. Let's talk agriculture. This community was clearly farming. Why here? The belief is that the confluence of this creek and river formed a sort of delta, where periodic floods deposited more nutrient-rich sediment in the bottomland. That, coupled with irrigation, made this area livable, at least for a time. So there's the foundations we just looked at, and you can tell, right, you've got a very commanding view both to the right side and the left side. So maybe about 50 yards from where we just looked at those foundations, you can look and you can see, a great view of the river here, little small rapid by Grand Canyon standards down there. And although I don't know this for sure, I wouldn't be surprised if some of the land down there was also cultivated. Even with the abundance of water here, you look at this landscape, and for anybody who's farmed or has any, you've ever gardened, imagining growing crops out here is still probably pretty hard to fathom. So the cluster of foundations we just looked at is basically right here in the middle. You can see how it looks out over this delta. You've got towering Grand Canyon walls surrounding you. Interesting chunk of limestone here. So what do we know about this area and the people that lived here? Well, my research before the trip turned up a few interesting things. To summarize that, I would say that archaeologists believe that this area was largely inhabited between about 1070 and 1150 AD. Now that doesn't mean that people didn't visit or live here prior to that or after that, but that time period was by far the most intense period of occupation. Now by 1200, it seems like most of this area was completely vacated. And that's an interesting trend because we see that kind of like 13th century time period. We see a lot of the Southwest, like the Four Corners region and stuff, being vacated in a similar time period. If you're curious, here's the report I'm referencing. You can find it if you do a Google search of this title. Okay, so now we are going to start the climb, maybe 500 feet or so, up to the granaries overlooking all of this. So when you're living down in this region and you're farming stuff like this, as well as over on the other side, then why do you store it all way up there? Let's get up there and examine that question closer. I've already mentioned the archaeological study done here in the 60s. While I hike, let me elaborate on it a bit more. This chart shows their population estimates. You can see how things skyrocket about 1050 AD, but a century later, it completely plummets. My natural questions when I see this are 1, why did they suddenly decide to move in? And 2, why did they leave just as quickly? Slowly getting closer. All right, my friends, at long last, here we are. Let's just take it in for a second. I mean, the view is unmatched. This is the 4th time I visited these, and it just never ceases to amaze. So to put in perspective where we just came from, so the foundations run along this ridge line here. There they are right there. A lot of the farming activity took place out in this region. With Google Earth, I can also give you a very good overview. So here's the creek we came down. The delta and the confluence are in this area. I wouldn't be surprised if they farmed the bottomland over here as well. The foundations to the pueblos are up on this ridgeline. Remember, they have a commanding view up and down the river. If I spin it around, you can see the view we are looking at now. Technology is kind of crazy, huh? So I'm right below the main cluster. There's this little one detached from the main 4. So the ones up here, because they are much more sheltered, are in much better shape. So if you're looking at these structures and you're like, okay, clearly it's a building, but for what? Did people live in them? They're so small. We call these granaries. And it's kind of a catch-all term that's basically, think of it as a storage unit. But these little storage units didn't only store grain like corn. There's been evidence of them storing like piñon nuts and ollas full of water and pottery, and basically just think about it as like anything needed for survival would have been stashed and cached in these little structures. There's still the original wood in some of these. These have long been empty. That 1960s report that I read said that when they did come up here then, they still found some corn cobs in these. Here's the lintel still in this one. Appears like there was probably a fifth one down here given this little wall over here, but I guess time has taken its toll. Okay, so we've seen this first setup here. Let's walk this ledge and go check out that other group. There's Josh, the faithful photographer. So, just climbed up on this little ledge. And here is undoubtedly another granary. Again, a little bit beaten down. But this one you can tell was quite a bit bigger. I mean, honestly, the surface area in here is probably the same as all four of those others combined. So here's the outside wall. Notice, look up there. You got those like finger swipes, coming in on the mortar and the fingerprints. So there's one more granary above this one. It's pretty tricky to get up to, but Josh has the camera and the selfie stick, and he's getting some good footage of that. So it'd be cool to take a look at that when we get home. One of the mysteries around this structure is what was the reason for the two wooden beams coming out of it. At first, my guess was they were for a pulley system, or possibly supports to rest a ladder on. But on closer examination, the beams don't extend out over the cliff, which made me second guess my theory. Could they be the remnants of a platform that used to extend out in front of the granary? Okay, so we're gonna walk along this ledge and go check that final cave out. There's the final cave up there. The cave was more or less empty. There's this rock stack in the middle, but I would imagine it's from river rafters in the modern day. There might have been the remnants of a wall in the corner. I couldn't tell for sure. Was this cave used in ancient times? Given its location, it seems likely, but for what? I couldn't tell you. Man, the views up here are just unreal. So when I was down there before I started hiking up, I think I said something like, oh, you know, these look like they're 500-600 feet up. I actually looked closer on the topographic map on my phone, and these are about 800 feet above the canyon bottom and where the other ruins were, you know, where they would have been farming. So I mean, it's a significant climb to get up here. And so of course the question is why? Why up here? Let's start off with what we do know. These types of structures aren't unique to the Grand Canyon. Throughout the Southwest, you will find ancient ruins that make you ask how and why. Many of these structures, these included, were built by a group of people we have come to call the ancestral Puebloan. They are believed to be the descendants of people who lived before them in the Southwest, known as the basket maker culture. And they're the ancestors of the modern-day Pueblo tribes, such as the Hopi and Zuni, hence the name, ancestral Puebloan. In southwestern archaeology, there are different time periods where certain trends are noted. We start to see an abundance of cliff dwellings and concealed granaries in the Pueblo III period. What we're looking at in Nankoweap is about in line with this as well. It's an impressive sight. The view is unmatched. But it is by no means the only place in Grand Canyon where the architecture seems defensive. There are isolated buttes and towers scattered throughout the canyon where evidence of the ancient ones have been found. These places are not natural places to live. Anyone who sees them in person recognizes that. I've also come upon numerous granaries in the canyon, so hidden that you can only spot them if you look from just the perfect angle. The more of these sites I've seen, the more I've questioned what was really going on. Experts agree the Grand Canyon would have been a difficult and marginal environment to farm. So why did people move in so suddenly? Were they seeking to escape something or someone on the rim? That was my initial assumption when I first ventured into the canyon years ago. But that could be wrong or overly simplified. Perhaps the climate was just right for about a century, and the ancient ones took advantage of it. It's possible, but it still doesn't account for all the defensive structures and hidden granaries throughout the Grand Canyon, or all of the Southwest for that matter. Why such a sudden abandonment? Did the land become unsuitable? Although I believe climate change is likely, I think there was something more going on as well. Significant turmoil that caused self-preservation to be the primary concern. That seems to be a common theme throughout the entire Southwest during this time period. And Grand Canyon doesn't seem immune from the larger events occurring in the region. My mind drifts back to what the Paiutes told Powell. Nankoweap, where the Indians had a fight. Whatever the cause for abandonment, they didn't vanish forever. Centuries later, their modern-day Pueblo descendants continue to have deep and intimate connections with the Grand Canyon. Thanks for joining me on this trip, guys. It's really been fun to get to show you an area that has had such an impact upon my life, and a specific spot that just continues to capture my imagination. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up. If you want to keep exploring the Southwest with me, hit subscribe.